Hello and welcome back to the channel. In today's tutorial I'm going to be sharing with you how to cut a simple beginner friendly inbuilt corset. So I'm actually making this for myself, so I decided to share it with you guys. So if you haven't yet subscribed, please hit on the subscribe button. So let's dive right into today's video. So first, to mark out my pattern, I've gone ahead to mark my basic measurements, which includes my shoulder to bust, shoulder to under bust, and shoulder to waistline. So for the top length, I added 5 inches to get the length of my blouse. So now I'll be marking my shoulder divided by 2, and I'll add ½ inch to this because this dress has a sleeve. I'll come down by 1 inch and I'll go ahead to connect this all the way to my shoulder, forming my shoulder slope. So after I'm done connecting, I'll go ahead and mark my basic neckline of 3 by 3 inches for this particular pattern, and I will go ahead to connect this for the neckline. After I'm done marking that, I'll go ahead and mark my armhole, or to mark my chest line, and to get that is your bust circumference divided by 6 plus 1.5 inches. And after marking that, I'll just go ahead and draw out a straight line on that part. So I'll just go ahead and mark back what I have on the shoulder, which is 7.5 inches on the chest line. Make sure I have 7 inches at this point before I go ahead to draw a straight line connecting that mark. So after this, I'll go ahead to divide the shoulder into 2 and I will mark. From that point, I'll come in by ½ inch. Go ahead to mark my bust circumference divided by 4 on my chest line. So the next step is to connect from that point I have on the chest line to the ½ inch at the armhole and at the upper part of my shoulder. So the next step is to go ahead to mark your dart intake, and for this I'll be using my nipple to nipple divided by 2, which is also your bust band divided by 2. My nipple to nipple is 7 inches divided by 2. I have 3.5 inches. So I went ahead to mark this all the way to the lower part of my pattern, and after that I'll be taking my basic dart intake of 1 inch on both sides of my pattern. And now I'll just go ahead to connect from the waist line to the lower part and to the upper part, and I'll also repeat this on the other side of my pattern. I'll place my ruler and I'm going to draw out connecting from my bust to my under bust, and also repeat that on the other side. So I'll just go ahead and I will use my marker to outline the rest of my pattern that I have marked out. So after this, the next step is to go ahead to divide your shoulder into 2. So for this pattern, I want to make use of a bust dart for this dress, and whatever you take out, you're going to replace it. So I marked 2 inches and I'll go ahead to connect it all the way to my bust line. So this dart intake I have at the shoulder, I'm going to go ahead to replace it at the sides of my pattern. Go ahead to place my curved rule and I'm going to go ahead to connect. After I'm done connecting, this is what I have. So I'll just go ahead and I will connect to the rest of my pattern. So if you blend it out, this is what you will have. So next, I'll go ahead and insert my body measurements. I'm going to mark my bust circumference divided by 4, and now I'll go ahead and measure about 1.5 inches. That is where my cup is going to start. So I'll measure the dart I have there and transfer it to the side. So I have approximately 1 inch, and for this pattern you're going to be needing ½ inch because you're just going to join it by the side. You don't need much allowance. At the under bust, I'll mark my under bust circumference divided by 4 and I will measure this dart intake, replace it, and add my sewing allowance to this side. So on the waist part of this dress, I'm going to use my actual waist measurement, but we are going to snatch it later. So I'm going to mark my waist divided by 4, then measure the dart intake and mark. So my waist is 28 divided by 4, I have 7. So I added ½ inch by the side. On the top length, you're going to mark your hip circumference divided by 4, measure these 2 inches, that intake, and you're going to replace it. So after this, I'm just going to go ahead to connect my pattern all the way. From the under bust, I'll take it to the bust and down to the waistline and also to the top length of my pattern. So after I'm done cutting this out, I'll just go ahead to use my marker to outline this. Then we are going to move over to altering the pattern to get the design we want. So next, from that 1.5 inches I came up initially, I'll still make a mark there. That is where my cup is going to start. So from the bust line, I went down by 1 inch, but later I went down by half again. But for now, we're going to just connect from that point to that part we have on the cup. Now I'm going to place my curve drew and I'm going to connect to my under bust this way. But before doing that, I'll just go ahead to adjust what I have on that point. So remember, in a basic corset, you're just going to go in by ½ inch from the chest line area. So I'll just go ahead and come in a bit by ½ inch and then connect it down. So I'm just going to go ahead to reconnect what I have on that point and then take it from that line down to my under bust this way. So this is what I have for the lower part of this cup, and I'll just go ahead to outline this part very well. So just like I said, I went down a bit by ½ inch. So on this part of the corset is either you mark your nipple to nipple divided by 2 and add half, or you can divide what you have between the shoulder and your bust circumference at this point, and you're just going to connect. So whichever one works for you better, go ahead to use that. So I'll just go ahead and connect to that point, and after that I'm going to go ahead to connect this all the way to the lower part of my cup. So this is what I have, and I'll go ahead to extend it out. So next I'm going to mark my bust dart. So I'm going to mark 1.5 inches from my bust. That is my bust dart. So to get your bust dart, you're going to measure your front measurement from the shoulder down to the waistline, and then go ahead to measure your back measurement from the shoulder to the back. You find out that from your shoulder to navel in front or waist in front is actually different from your shoulder to waist at the back. That difference you have is what you will mark as your bust dart. So mine is 1.5. I went ahead to mark that. So also there's another bust dart, which is the basic bust dart of ½ inch on both sides, which is 1 inch. But that is not what we are working with. We are just working with the difference between our back and front. You can say that is the bust dart, and I'll just go ahead to outline it to make it more visible for you to see. So I'll just go ahead and shade this off to indicate I have a bust dart by this side. So after I'm done marking that, I'm just going to go ahead to outline the rest of my pattern also to make it visible for you to see. So if you have any question, please also leave it at the comment section, and if you haven't yet subscribed, please hit on the subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and also leave your comments at the comment section. Now I'm going to go ahead to snatch my waist, and to snatch my waist I'll mark a style line before we go ahead to impute our dart intake. So I just want to snatch out 2 inches from my waist. So that 2 inches I'm going to divide it by 4. Dividing it by 4, you're going to be sharing half on one side of the front pattern, half on one side of the other front pattern, and do that also for the back. So sharing 0.5 inches into 2, I'm just going to go ahead to place, and that means I'm marking 0.25 on both sides of my pattern. So by the time I snatch out half inch from the left side of my front pattern, ½ inch from the right side of my front pattern, and also repeat it for the back pattern also, that means I'll be taking out 2 inches from my waistline. So there are other methods also to snatch your waistline. So I also have tutorials on that. You can just go ahead to check it out, and I'll just use my marker to outline this out. So the next step I'm going to take is to mark 2 inches from my waistline, and I'm going to take it to the lower part this way, and I'm going to outline. I'll go ahead to label my pattern C meaning center, S meaning side. Now you're going to be blending in your dart and to make sure that your cup meets, and while cutting the other side you're also going to blend it out. So I'll just go ahead to cut out my pattern. So after that, I'll pin this up, and the part that is popping up from the joining, I'll just take it out, and I'll go ahead to unpin this pattern again. I'll go ahead and measure my initial shoulder line, which is 4.6 inches left, and I'll pin. So what I'm trying to do is to make sure that what I have on that shoulder after going out or replacing my shoulder dart, I have exactly that. And I'll just go ahead to take this out, the parts that is popping up on top, and I'll just go ahead to cut it out. So here is my pattern, and I'm going to go ahead to continue cutting out the rest. And before cutting out, I'll go ahead to blend in my dart this way and pin it. You can also tape it up if you want to, and I'll just continue cutting out my pattern. So I'm going to notch this part where the cup meets the lower part of the pattern, and also for the cup part you can decide to make yours a 3-part corset, but I'm just leaving it as a basic corset cup, and I'll cut out the rest. So this is what I have after I'm done cutting out my pattern. Now we are going to move over to the back pattern of this dress, and I've gone ahead to mark out my basic measurement just like I did for the front. So looking at the pattern, you notice that the back is a bit shorter. So from my shoulder to bust line is 9 inches, and my shoulder to under bust is 12 inches, but there's no bust at the back, so we are leaving that. Now my shoulder to waistline for the back is 15.5, while the shoulder to waistline in front is 17. So remember, we took out a bust dart of 1.5 inches from that is 17 inches minus 1.5. You're going to be having 15.5 inches, and the total length of the dress in front was 22 inches. So because of that 1.5 inches that intake we took, the bust that, so taking out 1.5 from 22 inches, what I'm going to have left is 20.5. So I'm going to be using this pattern that I have from the side to explain. So if you notice, at my bust is exactly at the under bust, which is supposed to be there, is exactly. So from the waistline of this pattern, so this is a front pattern, if you notice the waistline is a bit lower, so I'll measure the waistline I have for this back pattern to the point I have for the waistline in front of this pattern. You notice that I have a difference of 1.5 inches. So that is the 1.5 inches that made the back pattern to be shorter. So yours might be 2 inches. It totally depends on what the difference between your front measurement and the back measurement is. So after that, I'll just go ahead to draw my that intake of marking my nipple to nipple divided by 2. But if you have any question, please also leave it at the comment section, and I'll just go ahead to connect my pattern and also connect to the lower part. So after I'm done doing that, I'll be marking out 1/2 inch on both sides, and I'm going to connect this all the way up, and I will also repeat this at the other side of this pattern. And now I'm going to be taking it down, and I'll also go ahead to take down the darts at both sides. Now I'll go ahead to insert my body measurement. At the bust, I'll mark my bust circumference divided by 4, add 1/2 inch for joining allowance. At the waist, I'll be marking my actual waistline, which is 28 inches divided by 4. I have 7. Measure this dart intake, replace and add my sewing allowance. Now on the top length, I'm going to be marking my hip circumference divided by 4, and I'll add 1/2 inch for sewing allowance. So I'll just go ahead to connect my pattern starting from the waist. I'll connect it up and go down to my top length. So now we're also going to snatch our waistline here. I'll go ahead, draw out my style line, and I'll be dividing 0.5 inches into 2. That is 2.5 inches. That is the exact thing we did for the front. So by the time we take out ½ inch from this part of the pattern and also take out for the other side of the back pattern, we'll snatch out 1 inch for the back, just like we snatched out 1 inch from the front. In total, we'll be having 2 inches snatched out from my waistline. So I went up by 2 inches and I will connect. So after connecting this, I decided to take it all the way straight, or not too straight, but I'm not going to use exactly the top length because this is the back pattern, and most times you want it to be shorter to make it comfortable for you to sit down. Now I'll go ahead and mark my lacing bar area. I'll be marking 2 inches from this part, and I'll go ahead to take it all the way to the lower part, and I'll draw a straight line connecting to those points, and I'll make a mark to indicate that I have a lacing bar there. So I'm going to come down by ½ inch, and I'll just go ahead to connect this to the first dart intake I have on that point. So I'll just go in by 0.25 and I'll go down by 0.5 inches here. So I'm doing this so that when I'm lacing my dress, the yoke won't have excess, and the lacing bar area will not pop up. So this is what I have at this point. So I'll just go ahead now and I will cut out the rest of my pattern. So after I'm done cutting out, the next step is to go ahead to cut out the skirt pattern. So now the total length of my dress is 57 inches and I added 2 inches for it. That is 59 inches. So I want my pattern to start from the upper part, that is the skirt part of my dress. So I don't know if you're really seeing this. So from that point, I placed my tape from where my waistline stopped, which is 17 inches, and I'll get my full skirt length, which is 59, like the total dress plus 2 inches turn up allowance. So after that, I marked 7 inches to get my hip point. So if you're a much taller person, you can use 8 inches. So the next step is to mark my waist to knee point, and my waist to knee point is 20 inches, and I'm going to go ahead to measure. Now I'll just come up by 2 inches up from that part. After that, I'll go back to the upper part of my pattern. So remember, we snatched our waist, we took out 2 inches, and my waist circumference is 28 minus 2, I have 26. So I'll be using 26 divided by 4, and I'll be adding 2 inches sewing allowance. I'll mark my hip circumference divided by 4 and add 2 inches allowance. So I forgot to mention that I used my hip circumference divided by 4 and I added my sewing allowance of 2 inches, and my hip circumference is 40 divided by 4, I have 10 plus 2 inches 12. So whatever you have on your hip point, you're going to mark out or take out 1.5 inches from it, or 2 inches. It totally depends on how fitted you want your dress to be. So I took out 1.5 inches. Starting from that 2 inches, we went up at the knee line. And after that, I connected from the waist to the hip point. From the hip point to that point, we came up by 2 inches after the knee line, and I will just go ahead to connect and make sure my line is straight. So the next step is just to go ahead to cut out your pattern. And after cutting this, you use it to cut out the back pattern. So to cut out the back pattern, I added 1.5 inches for zipper allowance. You can add 2 inches if you want. So now I'm going to go ahead from the zipper line. I will come in by ½ inch. This is to make sure that my zipper will relax very well at that point. So this ½ inch I took out here to create a slanted line. I'm going to go ahead and replace it by this side. or the part going towards the hip side, you're going to replace it. So the reason why I took out that ½ inch is to make sure that my zipper relaxes very well. So from the beginning of the pattern, I'll come down by ½ inch and then take up my main skirt and slant it down. This is also so that when you wear your dress or lace your dress, the zipper part won't be popping up. So I went in by ½ inch and I also came down by ½ inch. So I'll just go ahead to take up the upper pattern and trace it out, and make sure you connect it back to the waistline this way, and you're going to cut out. So after I'm done cutting this out, we'll be cutting out the sleeve and the other part of this dress in the sewing tutorial. And please hit on the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Thanks.